When I married David Miller, I thought our life was set on a beautiful path. He was the kind of man who could walk into a room and light it up with nothing more than a smile. People gravitated toward him, not just because of his charisma, but because of the sincerity behind it. He cared about people in a way that was rare and comforting. Together, we built a life that felt steady, happy, and deeply rooted in love. We had one son, Michael, who was only 10 when David passed away. To this day, I remember the night everything changed. It was a rainy evening in late November, the kind where the streets gleamed under the streetlights and the air smelled of wet leaves. David had gone out for a drive to pick up some groceries, something he always insisted on doing, so I could stay home with Michael. He promised he wouldn't be long. But that night, he never made it back. The police came to my door just after midnight. There had been an accident. A truck driver had fallen asleep at the wheel and David's car had been hit. He died instantly. I don't think words can capture the kind of silence that followed in our house after the officers left. It wasn't just the absence of David's voice or his footsteps. It was the absence of certainty, of safety, of the man who made our world feel complete. Michael cried himself to sleep that night. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to accept that I had to explain to my 10-year-old boy that his father was never coming home again. The days that followed were unbearable. Funerals, condolences, paperwork, all the rituals that surround loss felt mechanical and cruel. People came to the house, hugged us, dropped off food, and left. And when the crowds disappeared, it was just Michael and me, alone. For the first few weeks, Michael didn't talk much. He sat on the couch, hugging his father's old baseball glove, as though holding onto it would somehow keep him closer. I didn't push him. Children grieve in ways that adults can't always understand. I thought time would help him, that slowly, he'd start to smile again. But instead of healing, something stranger began to happen. It started one night when I walked past Michael's room to check on him before bed. His light was still on, so I opened the door quietly. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, whispering. "Michael?" I said softly. He turned quickly, as though startled. "Oh, hi, Mom." "Who were you talking to?" He hesitated. "No one. Just pretending Dad's here." My heart broke at his words. I sat beside him and hugged him tightly. "It's okay to miss him," I whispered. "I miss him too." He nodded, but there was something in his eyes, something guarded, like he hadn't told me the whole truth. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of orange juice. "Who's the second one for?" I asked. He shrugged. "For Dad. He doesn't like when I forget." I froze. "Michael, you know Dad's not." "I know," he interrupted quickly. "But he comes sometimes. He talks to me." I didn't know what to say. Part of me thought this was just his way of coping with the grief. Maybe he was creating an imaginary presence of David to comfort himself. But another part of me worried. What if he wasn't coping at all? Over the next few weeks, the behavior grew stranger. He set an extra plate at the dinner table, always at David's old spot. At night, I'd hear him talking in his room, sometimes laughing, sometimes having full conversations with someone who wasn't there. When I asked him about it, he always said the same thing. "It's Dad." At first, I chalked it up to grief. Kids find ways to hold on when they're not ready to let go. But then something happened that shook me to my core. One evening, I was cooking dinner when I heard Michael call from the living room. "Mom, Dad says you're burning the sauce again." I stopped cold. That was something David used to tease me about all the time. No one else knew it, and I hadn't made that mistake in years. I walked into the living room slowly. "What did you just say?" I asked. Michael looked up at me innocently. "Dad told me to tell you. He said the sauce smells burnt." I checked the pot, and sure enough, the bottom layer had started to burn. I didn't sleep well that night. From then on, Michael began to say things, small things, that only David could have known. He knew where David had hidden an old watch in the garage. He remembered the exact words David had whispered to me the day Michael was born, something I had never told anyone. And once, late at night, I heard him humming a lullaby that David used to sing to me, a tune I hadn't sung myself in years. I started to wonder, Was my son imagining all this? Or was something else happening? I decided to take him to a child psychologist, Dr. Rachel Adams. She was kind, warm, and patient. She listened to Michael talk about his visits from Dad. She told me later, in private, that sometimes children create very vivid connections with lost loved ones, almost like imaginary friends. It's their way of making sense of death. But her words didn't explain the things Michael knew. Things he couldn't possibly have guessed. One evening, a few months after David's passing, I was tucking Michael into bed when he suddenly grabbed my hand. "Mom," he whispered, "Dad says he doesn't want you to be sad anymore. He says you need to let him go. But he also says he'll always be around when we need him." Tears welled in my eyes. I hadn't told Michael how guilty I felt, how I couldn't stop replaying the night David left, wishing I had told him not to drive in the rain. How I carried that weight with me every single day. Did he really say that? I asked, my voice trembling. Michael nodded. "He says you'll know he's close when you hear the baseball game on the radio. He said he'll make sure you notice." David loved baseball. He listened to games on the radio every summer. I hadn't turned one on since he died. The next week, as I was driving home from work, I accidentally hit the radio button on the car. Static filled the speakers, and then, clear as day, the sound of a baseball game came through. I pulled over on the side of the road and cried. I don't know if Michael really sees his father, or if it's his way of carrying David's spirit forward. What I do know is that those moments gave us both comfort. Slowly, Michael began to smile again. He joined the school baseball team, saying Dad was proud of him. He stopped setting an extra plate at the table, but sometimes he'd glance at David's chair and smile quietly to himself. As for me, I've learned to let go of the fear that something was wrong with my son. Instead, I've come to believe that maybe, in some way, children are closer to the mysteries of life than we are. Maybe Michael really did feel David's presence in ways I couldn't. Or maybe his love for his father was strong enough to keep David alive in our home, in our hearts, in the little reminders that appear when we need them most. It's been 3 years now since David's passing. Michael is 13, taller, and more like his father every day. Sometimes, when I watch him laughing, I swear I can hear David's laugh echoing with his. And whenever a baseball game comes on the radio unexpectedly, I take it as a reminder. A reminder that love doesn't end with loss. It changes form, it lingers, it comforts, and sometimes, through the innocence of a child, it finds its way back to us. My husband passed away, then my son started acting strange. But in his strange ways, I found the courage to heal.